You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everyone, to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm your host, Carlos Noche. And today, I'd like to talk about if we could create a sales organization from scratch. What would be the beliefs, the mindset, the behaviors that we would establish to create a customer-first culture and obviously an organization that's highly successful in its selling motion. And to help us with that, I'm proud to say we got John Westman, an instructor at Harvard University in professional selling and strategic management. And John is also the vice president of project management at Citius Pharmaceuticals. John has got multiple years of experience and is a healthcare executive, instructor in sales and management. And I'm really happy to have you here, John. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Carlos. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, John, before we jump into the topic of the day, we have our question that we always start out with. What is something that you're passionate about? Those that only know you through business might be surprised to know about you.
Great question. Not maybe a surprise just because if I didn't tell you wouldn't know, but I have 2 grandchildren, one who's 3.5 years old, Owen, one who's 4 months old, almost 5 months old, Maisie. And they're new human beings. They are, as you know, fully formed in terms of fingernails and all this stuff. That's amazing. And then they're learning in ways and at a pace that's extraordinary. So one thing that's been a joy, not just to have, more family and watch your kid, raise a kid. It's also watching their agency and how very quickly, within like 6-7 months, once they get used to Earth, the planet Earth, breathing and such, they make their own decisions. And that's been a big aha for me. Plus, they're just amazing people.
My neighbors has his first grandchild, and his line was, I don't really love my kids all the time, but I really love my grandkids all the time. She just hit 6 months old, by the way.
Yeah, they have to get used to Earth, and then you start sleeping so the parents can start to function again. And I can't remember being that exhausted, and I'm sure I was. We had 3 kids, and loved every minute. Although definitely being a grandparent, you do not have the same responsibilities of keeping them alive and fed and whatnot. So it's joyful that way.
Well, I never had kids. My joke has always been I've never been home enough to make any. But they tell me it doesn't take long, but I guess I haven't figured that out. So jumping into the topic of the day before I get in trouble. So, John, I met you. It was on Andy Paul's podcast, wasn't it?
Yes.
And I know we talked. He's the one that started this topic about starting a sales organization from scratch. How would you do it? And so I'm happy that we're kind of taking that forward. So, from your perspective, if we were starting something from scratch, and I love the way you kind of, we talked ahead of time about beliefs, mindset, behaviors. What might be some of those things that we would establish that you believe would make it highly successful?
Yeah, thank you. And I do appreciate Andy for directing us in that way. So, and I think it's so cool to start about anything to say, well, what if we just built it from scratch, knowing what we know today? So I reflect on 2 big things. Number one, I've learned a lot about neuroscience the last 5 to 10 years and how it affects human behavior and the sales process and trust and liking. So that's one body of information that informs what I'll share in a minute. Second is all the best practices that we know have worked or haven't worked. And I really spent my career observing, learning from, and then trying to recreate top 1% sales performance and top 1% sales management performance. And then in the role of an instructor, you kind of have an opportunity to keep fresh and an obligation to keep fresh on those things. So I think it starts with, what do your buyers want? How do they want to be interacted with? And overwhelmingly what buyers say is, I would rather, the way I would like to be introduced to a company is from a warm referral from somebody I trust who's either in the same job I am or I trust them. And they would just say, hey, Carlos, you need to meet Bill or Judy, and why. So overwhelmingly, it's a warm introduction. Then, and that's number one. successful companies have a program to do that, either warm introductions or what used to be called peer selling or community building. And in the teaching that I've been doing to 40 different industries, over 40 countries, maybe 1,000 people over the last 6 years or so, I'm shocked at how little the client and the buyer has been incorporated into the training salespeople, telling salespeople what they need to do, and then being in these communities that are started by a company and then really run. The company schedules it, but it's run by the customers, so they get to learn from each other. And when so that's the kind of the peer selling thing. So buyer, 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 customer,
Focus.
client, and they drive. Now, of course, on the sales side, as you mentioned before too, there's a sales motion. You need to have certain activities to lead toward a purchase of what you're doing, of what you're selling. And in that respect, I would say what I would like to do from scratch is say, let's find the language and the activities and label them in a way that our buyers say, yeah, I like that. So when we have our internal conversations, we use language that our buyers, if they were listening in, they would be really happy and support us because of how we're thinking and behaving. And that aligns with neuroscience. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about the language you use today. We target people, we prospect them, we qualify them, we discover from them what they need, mostly to fit it to what we have. Then we close them. Okay. The another option is to say you're not a target, you're a potential future friend, or you're a potential person I can really help make you even more successful from what I have. So that's a friendly, connecting, collaborative concept. In terms of prospecting you, no, I'm going to find the fit. Let's find the connection. Well, really, that's part of qualifying too. Let's find the fit between what you need and what I have. And then let's explore for opportunities. Let's mutually find out what is it that you need? How can I potentially help you out? And then moving to the word close. I mean, that's such a aggressive, unfriendly word that doesn't even describe what's happening, because when there's an exchange and a signing of a contract, you're opening a financial relationship. And I credit Mark Hunter, the sales hunter, with the sales mindset book that really got me thinking about this. So you're opening a strategic partnership, you're opening a financial relationship, you're deepening, broadening your relationship because it's in the context of a broader interaction with each other. So those are some ideas. I think it's exciting. Many salespeople want to help other people. That's really what we're doing. We're helping our clients be even more successful. And when you can infuse the whole conversation or the whole area of the sales and reframe it to say, no, we're helping them be even more successful. Obviously, we can help them even more if they're connected to our company and continue to buy what we have. That's really the intent, the mindset, the belief that attaches to the highest performing salespeople and what I've been able to observe.
Excellent. I took some notes and I'd love to unpack a little bit of it. First off is just a validation, which I know you don't need, but it just so happens that yesterday I did a podcast recording with a CMO friend of mine. And this morning I did a podcast with someone I just met on the podcast, who's a 5 times founder and a CEO at a startup right at another company right now. And they both talked about alignment around the customer, the buyer, as you mentioned. So again, I know you don't need the extra validation, but not only people I've just recently talked to brought up the topic, I'm behind you 100%. Now, when we say that, it's funny because you have years of experience more on the pharmaceutical industry. I've worked most of my career in technology, mostly tech companies. And when I hear, sometimes people just give, hey, we have a customer first mentality. They say those words, but they don't mean them. So, any advice for an organization on, when we say it's a customer first kind of approach and we're putting the buyer at the center of what we do, what types of behaviors or things do we do to actually make that happen and really make that part of our culture?
Yeah, great question. So you're right. I grew up in medical device, pharmaceutical information, pharmaceutical biotech, so all healthcare related. I think the first thing to do is invite 5-year buyers or customers, clients, whatever you want to call them, to evaluate your behavior. It's what they want in general, and then it becomes to what they want in specific. So what we move to in our teaching is you're trying to be the seller that buyer wants. So it's different from a cookie cutter approach and saying we're going to treat everybody the same, or do unto others. It's really, what is that one other person? How do they want to be treated, and work with them? And definitely, now it's not just being friendly. It's also and helping them succeed. It's also helping them move toward decisions that make them more successful. So that's helping them through their buying process. Being a real partner. What happens in the surveys I've done of top reps is that as you engage and have that intent with your buyer, often the buyer will befriend you and you will befriend the buyer. And so remember, back in the day, people talked about, oh, I want to buy your Rolodex, which is basically your contacts on your phone. And really it's not just the contacts, it's that quality of the relationship. And when you have a client who's a friend, what happens is in that company, within their company, they tell you things. I got plenty of data on this that help you be more successful in that company and that are generalizable outside the company. Plus, they will refer you to people because they trust you and like you. So I do a lot of breaking down the elements of trust, the elements of liking, however, it all lines up with the intent, which is making that other person's life even better. Funny, Carlos, back in 1990, I used to, in my family, I would just say, hey, Carlos, what can I do to make your life even more beautiful? And they would laugh and they'd be like, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? I also would say, and in the business, I would say, let's answer the phone. How can I help you? That's not how we did it in the 90s. It wasn't like that. And I feel like there's somebody implanted in me what makes sense today, and people can happily talk about today, a long time ago. And that was luck, that was whatever. I will tell you too, the people I met through business and through friendships have advised me to do things and learn things that I could never have imagined. And it's really because they share the intent back to me to help me be more successful. So that's what's great about the sales function is you're the ambassador of your company. You get the chance to help make other people's lives better. And oftentimes it comes back tenfold to you.
I'm with you. And I think we both see sales. And I think, you mentioned the words that we use. I think the words really do matter. I always say there's not a person out there that wants to be closed. In
Yeah.
fact, think about your own purchases. You don't walk around going, man, I just got sold this house and I got sold this car. Maybe you should go to the same car dealership. You might overpay as well. What we all love to buy. Hey, I just bought a new car. I just bought a new home, right? And the words that we do use really do matter if we're trying to make this mutual on both sides. Thinking of which, so I do like the fact, you talked about the words that we generally use in sales today. Maybe we should switch those over and really think about that buying motion. And that's what we really try to do at value selling. In fact, when I talk to folks, I go, I've been to 11 different programs. At the end of the day, we all talk about getting the power and, and all this good stuff. There's a lot of overlap. I think the difference in what we try to do is we try to really align to helping someone make a buying decision, not about bamboozling them into a sale. And when we talked about, so let's dive a bit into mindset, because I think that's something that's also important going into this. There's one thing to say, hey, this is the approach we want to take. It's another one of having a mindset. So for example, I'll give you my trick and then I'd love to know your perspective. I think people need to be genuinely curious about other people, curious about their business, curious about what works and doesn't work, because by doing so, they could lead them into, hey, I might be able to help them, or I can't, and I can recommend someone else that can help them. What are your thoughts about mindset?
So mindset and curiosity, absolutely. What happens, so let's connect in neuroscience a little bit. Positive words reduce cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and increase serotonin, which is a feel-good hormone. Just positive words. So joy, thrill, excitement, love your smile. This is great. Words that are positive stimulate other neurons in the brain that have positivity associated with it, and we get this virtuous spiral up. And it goes the other way. So let's stay on the positive. So then in terms of being curious, if I'm curious, I'm asking you questions, Carlos. When you're speaking, just by the fact that you're a human being and you're speaking about something you care about, you are getting dopamine. Then when you think someone else is listening, let's say you think I'm listening to you, Carlos, or then you get even more dopamine. This was a study in 2012 by some neuroscientists at Harvard. They published a study, and the basic idea is this: as human beings, as we evolved 5,000, 10,000 years ago, we needed to tell our kids to go over that part of the forest, pick some berries, pick some nuts, bring it back. Don't go over there where there's a waterfall, there's bears, things like that, because legit, we needed those other people to survive.
Right.
So there's an intrinsic motivation for humans to share information. And then the other thing about the curiosity, there is a mirror neuron effect. While being curious, asking questions, the other person is going to talk a lot. They're also, if you're happy and happy to be there, they're going to be happier to be there. So there's a lot of neuroscience that I've learned that I try to incorporate to give people confidence that curiosity makes sense, not only because you're going to learn. Like I'm doing this chit chatting right now. I don't learn much when I'm talking. I learn a lot when somebody else is telling me stuff.
Great point. So I got a question for you. I love the whole idea about these positive words causing this, these dopamine hits, basically, right? Did I get that right?
You did. Yeah, I can share with you all the references. I'm referencing about 9 books and 3 articles that taught me a lot of this.
So one thing I've also heard though is like, for example, when you're interacting with someone, you're creating these positive or negative synapses or from this interaction. But I've also heard that negative interactions overtake positive ones. And there's like this rule of thumb, it takes 3 positives to overrule a negative. And I'm not trying to make a statement of we need to create negative interactions with our buyers, but sometimes we need to get them to have a negative reaction to their current state. In other words, a sense of dissatisfaction of where I'm at today. So they're willing to explore other possibilities. Am I nuts?
You're not nuts. So the process that we teach is there's 3 steps. Number 1 is to ask questions of the other. So I'm a sales rep, you're the buyer. I'm going to ask you questions so you can most fully understand your current situation. And in that situation, I'm going to bring up what is the cost of doing nothing? What are your problems? And let's quantify and monetize the impact of those problems today. Because as a human being has to say, I am dissatisfied with today before they're going to move and make a change. Okay. So, yes. Now you can do that and still keep positive on your side. And they're going to be bringing up problems and whatnot. And there is a balance. I don't think there's an absolute how it works. But so you can go in the valley of negativity and still come out of it. What you need to do, though, is still have the intent of helping that person.
At the
Because
end, yeah.
the instant it becomes even a hint of you doing something self-serving, the trust that you're going to get from the other person is going to drop. So dissatisfied with today. Next thing is compelling vision of the future. And what most people do is give it to the buyer. Well, hey, work with us. Here's what you're going to get. And that's a big mistake because the ownership of all these ideas needs to rest in the buyer. So
Right.
ask them, hey, what is the vision that you have? And you can tie yours into it. And the last of the 3 elements is easy steps to get there. Sometimes you're selling a 3-year implementation of a giant software program and it's super complicated. Still, it needs to be boiled down so the buyer can say, oh, you mean it's phase 1, phase 2, phase 3?
Yep.
And they feel like you're competent enough to make it happen. So those are the 3 things: dissatisfied with today, vision of the future, and easy steps to get there. I picked this up in a class at Northwestern Business School in 1984. I've used it in all marketing, all sales events, and organizational change events to diagnose what we need to, or kind of decide what we need to do, and diagnose when it doesn't work. And it's kind of a magic formula, and it's multiplicative. You multiply it. So, like if you got a 10 on dissatisfaction of today, and that, however, the compelling vision of the future is a 3, you're not as likely to move than if the compelling vision is a 10. And this idea pulls from all over. Plus, tons of sales methods are essentially creating this gap and trying to fill it too. So there's nothing brand new here. The way we teach it is simply a concise, clear path of questions. And really, it's mostly helping the sales rep ask questions instead of talking.
I'm with you. I mean, one line I use is Selling's about asking questions, not about making statements. One of our
Absolutely.
partners says, statements, I'm trying to say his words, but something like statements cause conflict because people, sit back and then they decide, do I agree with the statement or do I disagree with the statement? And a lot of times, even if they agree with something, they don't want to be pulled into something. Like to your point on the solutioning side of the equation, hey, before we tell them what our thoughts are and how we can make their world so much better, can we again be curious about their thoughts? What have you tried? What might be some of the key capabilities you'd want to see in this new project, new software, new solution that you're looking for? What do you think is critical? So I like that approach, and I think our framework basically follows it just with some different words. And I like the way like I always say, John, when we talk, I love challenging each other, but at the end of the day, we always come to the same spot.
Let's see if we align on this one. So the questions need to go all the way to these things. Number one, monetize. Number two, emotions. How does that make you feel? Number three, other stakeholders. So your boss, your colleague, your people who report to you, and or your family. So when you get to that depth, then you fully understand the situation. And and then what happens if you don't change? So I know you ask all these questions. I think a lot of organizations are not encouraging salespeople enough to stick on those questions because a lot of senior salespeople know exactly the product that the
Yeah.
buyer needs. And the one thing my co-teacher Michael McCarthy has said that I love, which is unsolicited advice is an insult. So here we are, sellers, and we got all this great discovery, and we're like, totally, I know what they want. So then we tell them, hey, I got the right thing for you. And they didn't ask for your help. They didn't ask for your suggestion. And until they ask for your suggestion, it is received as the other human as, worst case insult. Best case, I don't really ask you for it. So, let me finish talking. This is another insight. I'm not letting you talk at all, Carlos. So that's because I'm getting this dopamine because I'm talking. And so that's the other thing that we ask as a question was when you're listening to a customer, do you tend to also think of your reply? A full 84% of humans who've been in this, about 400 people now, have said yes. Some people don't. Some people are fully listening. And the thing is, if I don't wait one or two, well, probably 2 or 3 seconds after you finish, Carlos, that's my hack to say, oh my gosh, I'm kind of listening to reply more than I am fully listening to your tone of voice, your words, tone of voice, and body language. And also, when you're fully engaged listening, then you can also kind of look for what isn't being said. And so that's really the highest level that we all can get to, which is being fully present. I will now give you full space, Carlos, to speak instead of jumping over you.
I think it's Covey that talks about listen to understand versus listening to respond. And
Yes, he does.
apologize to my audience if I quoted the wrong person, but it's something to that effect,
It
isn't
is
it?
one of the 7 habits of highly effective. Yeah, and see, I didn't give you 2 seconds to stop. There you go then.
John, we're not trying to sell each other. It's just a fun conversation. And it's interesting because sometimes when someone's talking, right, we get excited. Hey, that's a good point. I am, if you ask my better half, she would says, I suck at patience and I jump in. But sometimes it's because my brain's running 1,000 miles an hour. And the other aspect of it is, if you see me turn around, if I don't write down some of the words you stated, I'll be intently listening, but I can't remember it all. And I really want to go back to some of these points that someone might make. So when I tell people, it's like, hey, when you ask questions, if you've thought through some of your questions and you're better prepared going into it, it's a lot easier to listen. And when you do listen, I try to take notes. And I'll apologize. I say, John, sorry if it looks like I'm looking down. I just want to capture some of this because if I don't, it'll go in this side and out the other side of my head, and I'll lose it. And I don't want to ask you the same question over and over again. And I try to do that in a way because I mean I don't know if this is great behavior or not, but it's my way of trying to capture all this great information you're giving me about your business and what's working and what's not working. Because if I can't listen and then remember it well enough to write it down and forget about an hour later. Let's say most reps don't even think about writing it down till a day later.
Yeah, so great point, Carlos. Here's the rule. If you're in a business situation and you're not, you're not at informal setting, but you're in a formal setting where you can put down and have a piece of paper and a pen, you always take notes, period. So here's what's happening. I'm looking at you taking notes going, wow, Carlos is kind of respecting what I say. Now, of course, you could be doodling. I don't know, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The brain says, oh, Carlos is investing time to try to remember what I'm saying. Wow, I must be saying something important. And totally agree with you. By tomorrow, if we remember 5% of the words in this conversation, that would be a very high percent. In another week, we're down to 1%. So when you're really trying to serve someone and make their life even better, taking notes is absolutely required. And so I think that I do get that question. Should I take notes? And definitely it's a pen and a paper. It is never, ever, ever a device. The way we think as humans is that device, there's more, you could be doodling on a piece of paper. And of course, if you're a serious person in sales, you wouldn't be, you'd be taking good notes. And so anyway, the device is a whole, there's lots of studies that says just having this on the table. So really park your device before you ever meet with any other person who you care about.
John, I couldn't agree with you more, especially so in these examples we're talking about in person, right? Even if you think about opening up your laptop or even having it creates a barrier between you. So I agree with you 1,000%. The only caveat I have is, hey, a lot of folks these days sell like this, you and me talking over some sort of video conferencing call, whether it be Zoom or Teams or what have you. And in doing so, what I find is, hey, whenever I look now, when I take notes, what are you seeing? You see the top of my big bald head. So one of the things I try to do is I put your pictures at the top, and underneath, I just capture it in Word or whatever. I type faster than I write, and I will be typing away. And I'll even make the statement because, hey, you might see me clicking away on my keyboard, and you might hear it. I'm just trying to capture some notes. Is that okay in a video type call?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I can tell you that when you preface it by saying I might be turning away and taking notes, that was good enough for me. And handwriting, yes, fine. The fact that you're just touching a keyboard throws in assumption
Doubt.
that you may not be taking notes about me. You may be sending an email. So
Ah,
I think it's individual, and I think I don't think it's absolute. However, uh, if I'm doing a video call, I'm taking notes by hand. I don't even say like you did here, which was great, and I'm going to say that from now on. I will explain. I'm going to be when I'm looking down, I'm taking notes on what you're saying because I care and I want to be able to follow up. Boom, huge. The other person's like, okay, at least this guy may not be able to help me. He's treating me, he's doing something that I would think would be useful for him to help me. So I like that. Now,
wow.
I would say to all the listeners, it's your lived experience that informs this. So I would do what works best for you. I have seen though, I mean, I do it myself and have made mistakes in human to human when we're face to face, being somewhat distracted, even with a watch, it's like
Correct.
any look away, any signal to the other person that you're not 100% on them results in the other person until they get to know you well, wondering, are you really focused on me? Or are you focused on you? And I will say in the trust equation that you can take online, it's by the Trusted Advisor Organization. The trust equation shows that orientation to the other is the most powerful single element in in creating and reducing trust.
John, I could talk to you all day, and hopefully we'll have you back and we can talk further about many of these topics. So here's my closing question. We call it acceleration insights. What might be that one piece of advice, be it business or personal, by the way, that you would share with our listeners that would help them be as successful as you have been?
Love where you are right now. When you love where you are right now, you are able to access all of your tools. You're not in the fight or flight, amygdala hijack and wanting to move on, and you can access all your brain and you can pay attention to other people. So other people would say, be in the now, be present, be mindful. It's all that. If you love where you are right now, it's enables you to help other people to the highest degree.
Love that. Awesome. All right, John, if people wanted to connect with you, learn more about what you do, what might be the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yep, I'm available on LinkedIn. It's easy to find. John Westman, John C. Westman on LinkedIn, and happy to connect.
John, I really appreciate it. That ends our podcast for today. So everyone, please check us out at b2brevexec.com. Please share the episodes with your friends, your families, your coworkers. You can check us out on your favorite podcast platform, be it Spotify, YouTube, iTunes. In fact, if you find us on iTunes, please give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate it. With that, I'm Carlos Noche. Thank you, John, for being with us here today.
Thank you so much.
And I wish everyone nothing but the greatest success.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.